I mean, the one that jumps to mind was a coating for the underside of ships' hulls. It's a paint, basically. It replaces what's called anti-fouling paint. I mean, the thing I love about copywriting and the job I do now is you delve into all these different worlds of stuff that you never knew existed. So ships go around the ocean, as you know, barnacles and stuff get stuck on the bottom. That buggers up the fuel economy badly. So every now and then, what they do is they paint this anti-fouling paint on to stop all the barnacles attaching. It's basically poison. Apparently there's ports they can't dredge anymore because of all this stuff that's sort of on the bottom. So what they came up with this paint, which the best description I kind of got was it's a bit like hammerite. So you paint it, you get the ship out, you put it in dry dock, paint it. And then when the barnacles get attached, you just put a big brush on and they kind of slip off. And you do this every few months. And the more you brush it, the smoother it gets. So it's harder for the barnacles to attach.
Welcome to The Fix. Sit down with copywriting experts Nick O'Connor and Glenn Fisher as they review, discuss, and improve real-world copy sent in by you. This is The Fix.
Really interesting, weirdly, and I don't mean that sounds like, oh, your barnacle paint is really interesting. It actually is, and I think that speaks to a deeper thread of copywriting. I've interviewed hundreds of copywriters, and the same thing that always comes across, it's in like the top 3 cliched things that copywriters have as a quality, is curiosity. But even you just talking about like barnacles on a ship and how that works, and the fact that it is a weird thing someone has to sell that paint, that protective thing for the bottom of the hulls of ships. I actually want to dig into that. How did you go about writing for something like that? Obviously, you've learned some information about it. What was your process for when that brief comes in? What's the kind of first step? How do you research and figure that out?
We had, obviously the brief came in. I had a long chat with the guy that was selling it, their marketing bloke. And of course, I mean, they know their business inside out, or they should.
Sure.
The point of the brief is so that I do. So I always say to people, look, send me a brief, send me anything else you think that's going to be helpful. There is no such thing as too much supporting information. It's a line I trot out to a lot of people, but it's true. I don't care. You can send me tons and tons of stuff, because the more I can dig around and find, the better.
And so that's interesting, actually, and I think that's a good point, because I always say to clients, like, just send me loads of as much as you can. Yeah. But then the next question is, I suppose, how do you go about hunting for those details? What are you looking for in that kind of supporting material?
I think that the first thing I'll do is, as I say, speak to the client or the marketing people and find out what they say to people, because they know, or should know, the kind of the best bits, the biggest benefits, and all that sort of stuff. And then it's having a conversation, having a chat. I was speaking to another client yesterday about something, and just in the course of conversation, he said something that was bloody gold dust. It's like, right, hang on, we'll latch onto that. And I think, as you say, it's being curious, it's being inquisitive, it's just digging, which is half the job. People don't appreciate you can spend a lot of time just reading and checking stuff out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's copywriting isn't about writing so much. That's a very small element of it. It is that digging in and figuring stuff out. So obviously you've written for ships' hulls, or the paint that goes on ships' hulls, but you've written for many, many things. And that's partly because you've been working for, I want to dig into your history as a copywriter, but perhaps if we start most recently, you've been working with Drayton Bird, the famous Drayton Bird. I'm not sure there's anyone listening to this who won't be familiar with the name, Drayton's name. Tell me about that. How did that come about? And what have you been doing with Drayton these past, well, how many years is it now?
13, I think now.
13, unlucky for some, as they say.
Yeah, I don't know why. No, it's like my previous job, we did computer systems for transport companies, and they launched this product for doing digital tachograph analysis. I won't bore you too much, but big trucks have a thing in them that record how long the driver's been driving, how much rest he's had. And it used to be a round card, a wax card scratched on with a needle. And then people would analyse these things to work out whether you'd broken the rules as to not having enough sleep, etc. They went digital, so you had a little card. And my boss at the time, that's a computer problem, we can fix that. So we started doing that, and I started doing the AdWords ads for it, just so it kind of fell into it as a role. And I wanted to get better at it. So on the internet, I discovered this great person who I thought was American at the time, but you all know isn't. David Ogilvy. The only problem was, his stuff was brilliant, but he died. So there was nothing new coming out. But through Googling him, I spotted this other guy who's English, Drayton Bird, and signed up to his mailing list and just started reading stuff. And it's brilliant. At one point, he sent one out saying, basically, can we be your affiliate? So got in touch, checked out the offer, and my old boss used to just let me do everything and then would rubber stamp it at the end. So I'd agreed a deal with Drayton that for every £5 our company made, he'd get paid £1. So it's a good business. I mean, they make millions that lot, so it would have been all right. But for some reason, the boss just went, no, we don't pay commission. So I had to, tail between the legs, had to mail Drayton and say, look, I'm really sorry, but it's off. And he wrote this reply, which said, I either work with people who pay me or I can learn from. I thought, okay. So I just chanced me arm, sent him an email, I said, well, can I work for you? And he kind of said yes. It took a year, and I had to work for him unpaid for a year. But I'm still doing the other job, so it wasn't so bad. And he did throw me the odd spanner here and there. And then finally sort of jumped on board, and away we went.
And did you start out by writing copy? Like you mentioned, like, I'm interested in that. People think you're saying like you didn't work, you didn't get paid so much, but you obviously can see the opportunity of learning from someone like Drayton, figuring it out. But what kind of stuff you came from, like writing copy for AdWords and stuff like that? What kind of stuff did you start out doing? Was you doing marketing and copy, or a blend of both?
It was a blend of both, because I still had the old job. I was using, if you like, what Drayton was teaching me to improve that. So we weren't just doing AdWords. We were doing AdWords, brochures, advertorial, all that kind of stuff. And it's just, it was then, and it has been, an education like no other.
Sure.
People go, you pay to go to seminars, you do stuff, but where else can you spend 13 years being sworn at by one of the best copywriters ever?
Well, I was gonna say, what's the biggest takeaways you've learned so far that stick in your mind from Drayton? But maybe I'll ask for the best swear words. It might be a thing, but we'll do.
Well, he has a sort of pet name for me. It rhymes with runt. I do remind him that it's Mr. Runt to him, but there we go.
Runt, yeah. So in seriousness, working with Drayton Bird for so long and seeing it like on the cliff face, so to speak, and that's not an attack of his complexion or anything, but what are the biggest I mean, there's obviously so much, but what's that kind of piece of advice, that the one thing, like the big takeaway that you think, God, that's what I wouldn't have had that without working so closely with Drayton?
Oh God. There's probably a few, to be honest. I mean, the hardest thing I found, I don't know about you, was kind of unlearning how you wrote at school, because they teach you how to write letters, and with copy, it's cobblers. You don't write, you can start a sentence with the word "and," you get told off in school for doing that. But we speak like that, and that's all you're doing, is writing how you speak. The big ones, reading is really important, and not just marketing books. You read everything.
Sure.
I mean, Drayton, every time you talk to Drayton, he's reading something different, and God knows what. Pruning your copy. Don't every word has its place, and if it doesn't have a place, get rid of it. So they're probably the two. I don't know. And then when to have a good idea. That's probably the other thing I've picked up. It's all too easy to sit there and think, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do this, I've got to do this. When you're actually better off just sort of leaving it alone and wandering off. I mean, I get my best ideas, call me sad, walking the dogs or ironing.
I can't agree more. I mean, you say those three things, they seem almost kind of not intuitive, or, well, they do seem kind of intuitive to copywriters who've been in it for a while, but it's a problem I always face. I feel the longer in your experience that you do this, the advice, the key advice is often the simplest. You need to read loads of stuff and read widely outside, as you say, of copywriting and marketing. You're more likely to discover interesting things, both curiosity, kind of interesting things to write about, but also stylistically. I remember it was Drayton, in fact. I remember we were in America at some point, and the only book he recommended to me was The Shape of Water by is it? Yeah, I want to say Andre. I've got it somewhere here. Andrea Camilleri. I never know how to quite say it. Italian writer, I think, but it's like a detective book. But he said about that being like a great kind of Spartan style and what have you. And I went away and read that, and it was very good. And I agreed with that thing. But that was about the stylistic thing. But that reading, people kind of go, oh yeah, whatever. But so few people, excuse me, so few people actually put that into practice. And it's the same when you say about the knowing when to have a good idea, about giving yourself chance and not trying to overthink it.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the reading, we always say to people, emails that you send to your mailing list, I mean, you guys do it. A lot of the time you talk about something that's bugger all to do with marketing. You talk about something that you can tie it in. And you can only do that by having this sort of wide interest in everything.
And how you write a lot of the emails, you write do a lot of email content, if you like, yourself. What I'm interested in, what your process. I'm always interested when I speak to copywriters who are there, kind of working along, doing stuff. What's your kind of process, and kind of even to quite a banal end, what's your kind of daily routine? You say about like, I'm interested in how do you create the space to have ideas, to read well, to do that kind of stuff. What's your 9 to 5 or your 6 till 10 or kind of thing?
Mental image, I read a lot in the bath, usually with a beer. So try not to think about that too much. But
yeah,
that's just
I do the same. I think about us both in the bath. But yeah.
No, I try and work, because I came from a 9 to 5, so 9 to 5:30 environment. I try and stick to that because it just works for me mentally. I love the freedom of working from home and not being sort of tied to an office. But by and large, I mean, in terms of getting ideas for, say, the emails we send out to our list or that I'll use for clients, it's just keep your mind open and see what you can see. You can be sat in a cafe. I remember doing it, sitting in a cafe over lunch and spotted a group of 3 old men moaning about everything. There's an idea for an email. You've just got to keep your eye open. There's a client we've got that we've worked with for about 3.5 years now, and he's got it. To start with, he didn't get it, but he now gets it, and he comes to us with ideas. Says, I've seen this, I've seen that. And that's brilliant. Almost anything can be an idea. You've got to just see something that interests you or catches your imagination. Even if you just scroll it down and leave it, and then later on something will ping in your head and you'll think, oh, hang on, that's relevant for that. I mean, one of our cats, for example, I've got 4 of the bloody things, but when my alarm goes off to wake me up in the morning, this cat knows that alarm, not as in, oh, he's getting up now. That means breakfast. So like Pavlov's dogs, ring bell, cat appears. So there's an idea for an email, because Pavlov's dog's famous, but Pavlov's cat isn't unarmed. Going over it quickly, but we used to have a St. Bernard. The St. Bernard knew where the treats were kept in our kitchen. And at a certain time every day, he'd sit and just look at that cupboard. There's an idea for an email there. That's your starving crowd, the people who want your product.
And so you're constantly looking out, like all through the day, for those kind of scenes that you see and those moments, and then you pick those out and hold them in your head, or whether you might make a note or whatever, and then you think, how can I apply that to the world that I'm writing about, to what I'm working on today? Or you go, what's the deeper truth there? What's going on? How do you adapt that story into something? I think it's often struggle with that element.
I think, well, first of all, I don't look for things. It's just stuff happens. If you keep your eyes open, stuff happens, and you sort of think, oh, that's interesting, or I can use that. There's something, even if you don't. Sometimes you'll see something. For example, the St. Bernard staring at the cupboard, starving crowd. That phrase was in my head, and that just illustrated it nicely. So I thought, oh, that's the email I can write. Other stuff, the old blokes arguing in the cafe, or moaning in the cafe, or the cat with the alarm. I just scroll it down as something that's happened that kind of caught my eye or made me think. And then later on, you'll come back to it and think, well, how can I use that? Can I use that? Some you'll scrap, some you'll keep. I suppose the more you do it, the more intuitive it gets. But the biggest thing for me is keep your eyes open. And if you see something and you think, oh, make a note of it. And then just see what happens. You might be able to use it later.
Sure. You mentioned there about speaking to a client who gets it and understands to look for stories and understands that process of kind of taking the everyday and making it into a lesson to learn or a way to relate and engage with the audience. But you mentioned they didn't get it originally. I know with the work that you do with Drayton and the actual kind of all the different clients you have, they are varied, as we've seen from writing for the paint that goes on hulls of ship because kind of thing. I know Drayton always talks about like working with candle makers and all this kind of stuff. You're obviously seeing so many different business owners and so many people who are perhaps outside of the world of copy, even outside of the world of marketing. They just know that they need to use this stuff and do it in some way. And they might not understand that. How do you work as a business in how do you deal with clients like that who aren't as aware of that? What's your process for want of a better word, breaking down the resistance that you often get from clients in that regard?
Okay, I mean, if you're talking, say, email marketing and having a list and mailing that list, I've got a slot reply that I refer to as Aunt Mabel. So the thing is, Aunt Mabel, whether she's spending £1 in the local pound shop or whatever, or you're talking about a deal worth £1,000, £10,000, £1 million, it's the old marketing adage, the buggers only buy when they want to, not when you want them to. So you've got to keep yourself in their mind all the time. So when they finally are ready, they go, oh, hang on, I'll speak to that Glenn about paid for model bloke holes or whatever. The only way you can do that is by sending them regular emails. But I think it's an Ogilvy quote, you can't bore people into buying. So if you constantly send them sales emails, they switch off. I mean, you must get them, I get them. So we send we advise people to send what we call helpful and interesting emails. So this is this idea again of an event that's got nothing to do with the product, just something interesting to read. And at the end, always put, oh, if you'd like to get in touch. And then every 8 to 10 of those, you send a more salesy thing.
And you when you're speaking to clients, is it just a case of you explain to them that's how it works? You explain like, this is what we've been doing. Like, how do you get met with resistance in that regard, or have you been quite lucky to like have clients who get it? Obviously, they know the name Drayton, so it's kind of they're going to trust him a bit more. Or how do you show them that works? I mean, it obviously inherently does. I understand, and we're preaching from the same kind of thing. But like, how do you overcome? Because people generally are like, well, I don't want to send out loads of emails. People don't read them, all that kind of stuff, which is a misnomer and terribly wrong. But how do you push through that kind of thing?
Well, usually, the first thing I can say to them is, well, you're on our mailing list. You've contacted me because you're now interested. I don't know how long you've been on our mailing list. I mean, I can tell from our figures that the fastest from somebody signing up to buying something from us, the quickest I think is a couple of days, the longest is about 2.5 years. So I can say to people, look, you're on that mailing list. Don't know where you were, but you've signed up and now you're talking to me. So that proves it works. They will have signed up for Drayton's 51 helpful ideas, which is the thing we've got on our website. That email sequence, you'd think it's got 51 emails in it. It hasn't. It's got 168. And when you drop out of that, you get our regular broadcast, which Drayton does the lion's share of writing those. And you probably get emailed 4 or 5 times a week.
You could basically show them through the proof that they've taken the action. Yeah.
And it's not me telling you to do something. We do it ourselves. And that's how we make our business.
Yeah. It's show, don't tell in the ultimate way.
I think people are hesitant of email. There's the question you get asked a lot is, how often should I email? Well, anytime you've got something interesting to say, send an email. The classic, I'm sending a newsletter. Drayton's read response is normally, it's not a letter and it ain't news. But where people tend to make mistake, they say, I send it out once a month. And I say, well, how many stories have you got in it? Well, 5. Well, there's an email a week there. Just send out one story. Don't do lots of things.
No, I agree. I think the more, I've come from a world of direct response, and I've sent like writing daily, often twice a day to the same lists. And invariably, the more you send, the more money you make. That's just a kind of rule of thumb. But as you say, the key thing is, and this comes back to what we were talking about earlier, you've got to entertain that the people who are reading it. You can't just send them twaddle, and you can't just send them sales all the time. The idea of talking constantly to your audience isn't one of talking at them, it's talking with them, it's entertaining them, it's engaging in dialogue.
Yeah,
I think that.
I mean, I always like, well, it's true, it's salesmanship in print, as they say, but it's the same as talking to somebody. If I constantly stood in front of you and went, buy this, it's great, buy this, we do this, it's great, buy that, oh, we've got a sale on, by the way, you'd switch off. But if I'm talking to you and we have an interesting conversation, then when you are ready to buy something, you go, oh, Gerald, look, about that thing you were talking about the other week. That's just how it works.
True. I mean, I completely agree with you. You mentioned, I'm interested just to dig even further back. I'm always intrigued by how people got into this world. Obviously, before you started working with Drayton, you were writing Google AdWords and stuff like that. How did you, was it through writing? Like, how did you actually discover that copywriting was a thing and that you could kind of do that as a job?
David Bowie.
David Bowie.
David
that's
Bowie.
A different. That's not Ogilvy. That's
David Bowie.
Bowie's a different one.
As I said, the company I worked for, we did computer systems, and they needed some manuals written for the various systems that were out there. This was donkeys years ago, pre-internet even. That's how long ago. And so they hired a couple of freelancers in to do the writing. And I just got chatting to one of them, and it turned out he loved music. Now, I can't sing or play a note, but I love music. I'm fairly sure you do as well.
Yeah.
So he was into his music. We just got chatting. It turned out he had written and was rewriting the only biography of David Bowie that David Bowie had ever said, kind of read that because he knows more about that period of my life than I do. And this guy knew a lot of the Bowie connected people like Mick Rock, the photographer. And we just got chatting, over music. And having written those manuals, he then started doing the marketing flyers and stuff at the company. And because we were friends, we just chat. I got interested in it that way. And it just sort of rolled on from there. He then left and everything just fell on me. So it was like, okay, time to learn how to do this properly then. Hence looking up Ogilvy.
So you, before that, you were a writer or a thing? It was more of a...
I wrote computer software. I wrote the software. I was a COBOL
programmer. You literally read the software?
Yeah, I was a COBOL programmer.
All right. So that's a different language altogether.
That's far simpler. You've got far less words and there's only a few things you can do. But again,
I was going to say, have you taken any lessons from writing code into writing copy?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I famously remember famously to me, having a problem that I couldn't solve with a bit of code, and I was struggling with it. And I think that night I was going out with a mate or something, and coming home from wherever we'd been after a few too many drinks, suddenly it clicked. And there's just this whole point of leaving the idea to fester and do what it wants. So I went in the next day to put in what I thought was going to work, and lo and behold, there was the solution. So yeah, that was a lesson I'd learned without realising it.
It's taking the time, and even in something as technical as code writing, it's the same kind of thing. You've got to let your ideas. I was going to say, what is it? Gestate. I was going to say gesticulate. I don't think you can let ideas gesticulate. You can let them gestate.
No, people talk about this, the subconscious, and it is. When you do it, it's amazingly powerful to read something and then just put it aside and forget about it, and then you can be, as I say, ironing and dog walking are the two times I'm most. I guess you'd call it a meditative state, but this is
sure. I guess it's like maybe. I think people find it difficult maybe to create that space because they work in a 9-to-5 kind of extreme capitalist society ware very few people are aware of that. I guess you're lucky in the sense that you work with someone like Drayton, who's been through that, understands the importance of allowing you to have ideas and the freedom and space that is required to do that. I was lucky in the sense that the agora world that I worked in, again, understood that. But I can remember when I was employing writers, it was often the first kind of like, they'd look at me when I go, just go out. Like, get out of the office. Like, I don't want you here. You're not going to suddenly on demand create an idea for me. You need to go out in the world and and be at a cafe, be here, do what you want, be at the cinema, and do what have you. I guess, but it is testament that that's what you've learned, doing it that way, and that is it's the only way you can really allow it to happen. You can't come up with ideas on demand. I mean, you can, but it's very hard. Yeah. You have to like create that space, and would you say that's something you've had? Is that inherent in the kind of approach and philosophy you've noticed from like working with people like Drayton?
It's one of those things I always like, probably like you think, how do you have a good idea? These people are really clever. They always have good ideas. Oddly enough, I was reading something by Dave Trott last night, and it says a good idea doesn't care who had it. So that's true, which I loved. But I think even if you're working in this horrible corporate 9 to 5 and you're under pressure, you usually got a bit of breathing space, even if it's just a day. So it's read whatever it is you've got to try and have the idea about, and then put it to one side, forget about it, and see if that night when you're doing the washing up or putting up with the wife watching Coronation Street, whatever it is, that you can, maybe that idea will come to you. It does work. It sounds like one of these sort of, start doing incantations and chanting, but it works. The subconscious mind, I mean, you know it, and probably most people know it.
Yeah, well, you say that. I mean, I do know it. I've made a career out of trusting myself to do that, despite the extreme paranoia that goes with like having that space. I think a lot of people, and I speak to the copywriters who might be listening, who are like, oh yeah, it's all very well, but what if it don't happen, and blah blah. But as I would testify, and you testify as well, Gerald, it does. You've just got to trust the process, and it does sound a bit waffy, and it does sound a bit kind of abstract, but that is the only way you can kind of truly allow those good ideas to come.
There's a really short book, and I can't remember who wrote it. Drayton will kill me. I think it's just called How to Have a Good Idea, or How to Have an Idea. And it's brilliant. It basically outlines that process. Now, I've got sitting on my desk 2 rather tatty bits of paper. And one of them is the sort of the summary. I'm just forwarding. One of them is the summary of that book, gathering materials and incubating stage, all that stuff. I'll send you a scan of it if you want to use it. And the other one is Drayton's, I think it's 40 magic words for copy.
There you go.
40 magic words. Oh, they're great. I mean, you must have seen the books like 100 Greatest Headlines and all that sort of stuff. So if I'm writing a headline and I'm stuck for an idea, I will refer back to that tatty bit of paper and have a look. And they're all the obvious ones: new, now, introducing, at last, secrets, all that sort of stuff. But there's no harm in having an A memoir there sitting there, and you suddenly think, oh, hang on, I can use that.
Yeah, no. You also mentioned, which I want to mark because it's a good piece of advice. You're saying when you were talking to a client and they said the idea, like they expressed the idea, and you were like, right, I'm going to take that. That's gold dust kind of thing. That ability, again, it's trusting yourself to be able to listen and to create that space where the best idea might. I think you said it's. I can't remember the quote you just said, but I always think about
good idea doesn't care who had it.
Yeah, it doesn't care who had it, and I kind of the complementary one to that is what I say, where you have your best idea might be in someone else's head, and it's that their expression of it might be like and it's your ability to be able to notice that. They won't notice it. They're just spouting. They're saying what they say. They believe in the product. They're just going to talk like that. But it's your ability as a copywriter to be listening and to be on enough to go, what you've just said there, that's the key. That's what I'm going to take away. That's again, it's all this. I guess what you could sum up what we're talking about here is that ability to stand back and let everything happen in front of you, and just to observe and listen, and to be on the lookout for these moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think stopping, and it is important. It comes with practice, obviously, but I think most people with their own, they say, I find it really hard to write about this. Yeah, that's because it's your business. Yeah, especially if they're business owners, that's even harder. I think you're so up close to it. Whereas, as you said, to be able to sort of sit back a little bit, you can spot this stuff. Plus, you get to hear their passion, but their excitement about it. And when they really get going, that's when you can start getting things out.
Yeah. Oh no, I agree. I agree completely. I started, Gerald, by asking you, obviously someone who's worked with Drayton for 13 years, it's a long time. I asked you what the best piece of advice and this best takeaway. I feel like I have to bookmark that with what's been the worst thing about working with Drayton.
Working on something, thinking you got it licked, and then being told that it's shit.
Oh, there you go. You see, I would also argue that that's the sign of a good mentor and a
yeah. I say to clients, we talk about the process of how we work. Drayton, despite being 87, he's still heavily involved. Literally anything we send out to client as a finished product, he will have read it and checked it. So what we tend to do is one of our copywriters or myself will liaise with the client, and we'll bounce it around until we're all happy with it. And then I'll send it to Drayton. Now we're getting better at it. We don't tend to get too many revisions, but the record total for rewrites is 7, and I hold that. So
that's just seven ways of improving that copy. That's the
7 ways. If that was crap, start again. But I mean, he tells a story about writing, I think, 20 headlines for somebody. I can't remember who. It was one of the the greats. Then the guy just saying to him, "Well, that's good. Go and write another 20." He's only giving out what he took himself.
Well, it's good to hear that, and I see it as our duty to continue that tradition and be harsh to people. But it is. I mean, we start whenever we just did a boot camp in London, and one of the first things we start with, it's the hardest thing to put your copy in front of people, and then we're gonna say it's wrong, and we're gonna. I mean, not if it's brilliant and it's like, wow, that's really good, and praise deserves praise, but it's the likelihood is it's not going to be right, and we want to help improve it. But that's by the by. Like, people are just like, oh, I don't want to put that in front of people. I'm going to get it wrong. It's like it's wrong. It's just that there's always ways you can improve stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
But everybody goes through that process.
Yeah, I mean, watching, for example, when you get past Drayton telling you it's shit and you got to rewrite it, and you watch him take a bit of your copy and change it, and I refer to it as fairy dust, because it's just the simplest little tweaks. You think, my God, but that's what 60 years of experience does for you. You could literally take out 3 words, swap it for 1, and you think, well, that's loads better. Or rewrite something, or even add a word. I think adding words to copy, but yeah, he'll do it just to give it that more personal, friendly touch. It's amazing to watch.
Yeah, it is. It's very good. Well, thank you very much for your time, Gerald. It's been really interesting seeing inside the world of working with Drayton a little bit, and hearing about your own story. I'm kind of interested to see. You'll have to dig it out for me if you could, the Hull paint ship.
I'll find that. It's an advertorial, I think.
Yeah, I just stuff like that. I find fascinating, and it's part of the fun of the job. The stuff you end up writing for. My current one is Elvis's hair. That was the strangest one I've written for. I'm yet to beat that myself. I've had some strange ones, but yeah. Thanks very much for your time, Matt.
No worries at all.
If you enjoy The Fix and want to get access to even more good stuff, join the Fix Accelerator today. Get access to special masterclasses from Nick and me, watch expert interviews with industry legends, join live copy feedback sessions every week, and get connected to our very own private copy network. Visit thefixaccelerator.com for more information.